Hi friends, Matt O'Reilly here, one of the pastors at Hope Hole United Methodist Church with today's digital devotion. We're continuing our journey through Paul's letter to the Philippians, and today we're looking at Philippians chapter 2 verses 19 through 30, where Paul describes his plans to send Timothy and Epaphroditus to visit the Philippians, to check on them, to encourage them. Now, I remember the first time I preached all the way through Philippians, I got to this passage and I thought, what in the world, how do I preach travel plans? What can be learned from this? What's the theological and pastoral point to be made with, I plan to send Timothy to visit you, I plan to send Epaphroditus to visit you. And then over time, it began to become clear that Paul isn't simply recounting travel plans. He is holding out Timothy and Epaphroditus to the Philippians as men who embody the character of Jesus, the mind of Christ that we've been talking about. And he needs to do that because it might be easy for us to think, how can we really embody the mind of Christ? I mean, Paul describes this other-oriented, self-giving love that characterized Jesus in his descent from heaven and his death on the cross. But is it really possible? Can we really, can a human being really embody the mind of Christ to that extent? And so Paul believes the answer to that question is yes. And perhaps he's anticipating that the Philippians think, how can we really do this? And he responds by holding Timothy and Epaphroditus out as examples of real live human beings who embody the character he's been describing. Let's take a look at the text to see how this works out. He says in verse 19, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, so that I may be cheered by news of you. I have no one like him who will be, here's a key piece, genuinely concerned for your welfare. All of them are seeking their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. So Paul has got some people on the team, apparently, who he says are self-interested. He doesn't trust those folks to send them to check on the Philippians. Timothy, however, is unlike these other folks. Timothy is not seeking his own interest. Rather, he is genuinely concerned with the interests of the Philippians. And if you go back to chapter 2, verse 3 and verse 4, that's the kind of language that shows up when Paul describes the mind of Christ. He says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. And so Timothy is embodying that other-oriented, self-denying, self-sacrificing love and other-oriented interest for the Philippians. So Timothy is a real live human being who embodies those aspects of Christ's character. Epaphroditus has come from the Philippians. We read about him beginning in verse 25. He's come from the Philippians to Paul to be their minister to Paul while he's in prison. And somewhere on the journey, he became ill. Paul says in verse 27, he was so ill that he nearly died. Right? And now Epaphroditus is functioning for Paul as someone who embodies this self-sacrificial character of Jesus. Right? Christ is the one who was obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Epaphroditus now is the Philippians' minister to Paul in his need, even to the point of death. So again, if the question is, can human beings really embody this thoroughgoing, other-oriented love, right? No interest in the self and our agenda, but Christ-like, self-giving, other-focused love. Paul's answer is yes, real human beings can embody that kind of character. And I know two guys, one named Timothy, one named Epaphroditus, who are not motivated by self-interest, who are motivated by a genuine concern for you, and who are willing to sacrifice their lives. So as we think about the character that Paul wants to see in the lives of believers, this is what it looks like. Self-giving, other-oriented love. That's what holiness looks like for Paul. That's what Christian character looks like for Paul. And this is not for Paul some unreachable goal that only a few really super saints, really super Christians ever reach. For Paul, this is the normal Christian life. This is what he wants. This is the kind of character that he wants to see manifest in the everyday life of the Philippian believers. And it's the kind of character that he wants to see manifest in our lives. So then we need to be asking the question, what does self-giving, other-oriented love look like in my life, in my relationships, when I'm at work, when I'm with my family, different times? What does that look like? And if we can answer that question, we are beginning to understand what Paul means when he talks about Christians having the mind of Christ, and which is really what the Bible means when it talks about holiness. Thanks for watching today's digital devotion. See you next time.